Sequelcast. Hi, this is Matt with the Sequelcast, and we're doing another movie video game showdown on video games based on the famous sequel, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. We'll look at the takes on that movie with the Nintendo video game, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and a Game Boy. So a lot of different takes on a very famous movie in video game form. Hope you enjoy it. So in this movie video game showdown, we're looking at 4 different takes based on the movie Terminator 2 Judgment Day. We'll look at a Game Boy game based on the movie, a Nintendo game based off the movie, a Super Nintendo game based on the movie, and the Sega Genesis adaptation of Terminator 2, the arcade game. So a lot of different takes, and we'll talk about how it relates to the film, at least the first levels of each game, and I sort of do running commentary as I play these things. So let's start with the Game Boy game of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So the beginning of this Game Boy game of Terminator 2 Judgment Day is very strange. The picture is of Sarah Connor in the desert, and she's talking about the war of the machine raging on for years and what her future older version of her son, John Connor, did, which isn't something she really should know. But it's about, remember the beginning of Terminator 2 is kind of in the future with John Connor fighting the robots very briefly. I think you only even see John Connor as an older dude in the director's cut or something. But in this sequence, it's interesting, it's set up before the movie, and he's trying to go and rescue the T-800 unit and send it back into the past to protect his teenage self and his mother, which is the main storyline of Terminator 2. In this level, it's very unclear what you're supposed to do. You're told to shoot the shield generators, which are those little towers, which I'm attempting to do. The gameplay and the graphics aren't too bad for a Game Boy game at the time. It's a bit like a Contra or something, although not as good and sort of very limited. You get all these landmines, these T-800s, kind of going back and forth. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to take these shield generators down. They never showed me what it looks like in that intro cinematic. And again, I don't understand why Sarah Connor is saying all the stuff that's happening in the future, a time period in which I believe she's supposed to be dead. So, looking at this game with this future setting with the Terminators and all the hunter-killer ships flying around dropping bombs, it makes me kind of disappointed that we never got a Terminator movie set in the future that was really about these epic, huge-scale battles between the Resistance and the cyborgs. Okay, so I destroyed the power generators, but then I get a game over because it says the power generators have been shot in the wrong order. But to begin with, it never even tells me that I have to shoot the power generators in a correct order. It doesn't make any damn sense. You're not told you have to do them a certain way, so I already suspect that's the case. Okay, so we're going to try again. Let's see if I can figure this out. Running around over the landmines, dodging all these bombs, and what's going to happen? One nice thing about this game compared to some other movie games is you don't die quite as quickly. It looks like they took a little bit of time with this one. So I destroyed a little short one. Maybe it'll go from smallest to tallest, although I can't remember how many of these towers there are. Looks like I'm doing okay so far. I haven't lost too much health. There's rumors of a Terminator 5, speaking of that sort of thing, that Schwarzenegger was interested in for a time, and then there hasn't been much on it lately, so maybe it'll come to pass, I don't know. I think, a Terminator movie without Arnold Schwarzenegger weakens it a lot, and I wasn't a huge fan of Salvation, the most recent one. So what I just did there is I jumped in a little flashing graphic that I guess is a note from Sarah Connor that's telling John Connor the only way to shut down the generators is to hit them in the correct order, tallest to shortest. Well, that would have been useful at the beginning of the level. Why is it hidden on a note that you just have to randomly collect? And also, since I already destroyed a short one, I was trying to go from shortest to tallest, I'm screwed. I can't reset the level, it's only one life, and then I die. It's really, really frustrating. If they would have said in the beginning you have to destroy these tallest to shortest, fine. But just having to find a piece of paper to know how to do it is tremendously frustrating. So we're going to go through and look at trying to do this part again. going from tallest to shortest. Let's see if I can remember which one is the tallest one. Yeah, out of all the Terminator films, I guess I'd rank them best to worst. I like Terminator 2, and then Terminator 1. And then I think I like Salvation a little bit more than Terminator 3, even though Terminator Salvation did not really have Arnold Schwarzenegger other than a cameo from like a body double in the laboratory near the end of the film. It at least was trying to do something a little bit different. In Terminator 3, it's like, okay, there's, Terminator's got to fight a lady Terminator, really? That's the best they could come up with. The plot just seemed like such a lame sort of remake of Terminator 2 that I didn't quite understand why Terminator 3 was necessary. But I do like the series. I've never seen the TV show, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and I've heard that's actually pretty good. So maybe I'll get around to watching that one of these days. But it's only 2 seasons, so I don't know if it ends on a cliffhanger or whatever. So I'm taking these down. So far, no message that I've messed up. Trying to go from tallest to shortest. It doesn't help these things don't look like shield generators. They don't have, I don't know, they're not like flashing. There's not a map telling you which ones you have to get. They just look like towers. These older video games used to leave a lot more up to the imagination of the player as far as what to do. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. It made them less accessible in a lot of ways. And some of these games had it where you had to read a 100-page instruction manual to figure out what to do. Although this wasn't really the case with the Game Boy games. So I think there's only a few more of these towers left and still not dead, so that's a good thing, but I'm almost dead. Going back and forth, and yes, I destroyed all the towers, so I gotta fight this boss right here. Looks, I think he's like a bigger hunter-killer robot thing on treads, and I'm trying to hit him as much as I can, which isn't doing very well. Looks like you can duck some of his shots and leap up and down, although it looks like there's a lot of cheap hits too, because you can't duck down and hit this guy's treadmill to take him out, you know, the easy way. So let's see, I hope I don't die doing this. Going up and down, up and down, up and down. Yeah, well, got past the first level on that one. So we took a look at the first stage of the Game Boy game of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Now let's move on to the Nintendo game of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Maybe that one will start in the future as well. Start things off with some pixelated Nintendo nudity. Don't see that very much. The Terminator is gold at the bottom, not sure why that is. But the mission is to find John Connor, and let's go. Alright, so this one, unlike the Game Boy game, starts off kind of how the movie starts off, where you're the Terminator, although he's not naked, he already has his clothes and sunglasses outside of the biker bar, and he's trying to find Sarah Connor's location, I presume. I wasn't paying too much attention at the beginning. A weird thing about this is you're going left to right, just punching people in the face, but after you go at the end of the first screen, these arrows kind of pop up, so you're consistently scrolling to the right, and then scrolling back to kill everyone, and then scrolling ahead again. I'm not really sure why that's necessary. It's very easy to die in this game as well, because you take a lot of cheap hits. You don't have a gun, it's just the beginning of the movie, at this part of the game, so you can just punch people. And I just got terminated, so let's try this again. Yeah, it says mission find John Connor, cannot self-terminate, so he cannot kill himself, but other people can kill him, that's okay. It's weird, because at this point in the movie, you know, he could just kill people and not give a shit. It's not until John Connor tells him later that he has to shoot people in the knee, so I'm not quite sure what the cannot self-terminate thing is in relation to. There's a random cop on a motorcycle that tries to run you over, and I don't think you can fight him. You just gotta punch these guys over and over again. These bad guys don't really look like biker dudes to me. They have long white hair, these leather jackets, and these big poles. They look almost like a bad guy out of Highlander, or maybe something out of one of the Mad Max movies. And this being a Nintendo game, there's not much variety in the bad guys, so you fight the same guys over and over and over again. Now you got these muscle men on the truck, Can I get on top of the truck? Nope, but they'll jump and try to punch me. Again, this flickering effect with the characters flashing is something you see a lot in Nintendo games, especially in the later one when they're trying to have a bunch of people fit on the screen at once, which is something that Nintendo could not do very well. So this endless parade of trucks, endless parade of bad guys. I think I'm doing okay. There's the energy meter at the top of the screen, but there's no score. You can't block things. There's no real skill to the fighting. You just sort of have to keep your distance and hope you can hit them before they close in and hit you. A problem with doing this kind of fighting game with the side-scrolling style, there I just got terminated again, is unlike something like Final Fight, where you can kind of move up and down on a plane to avoid punches and stuff, this one, it's simply left to right, kind of like the game Russian Attack. So, there's not much options for dodging punches or whatever, you just kind of have to take every hit that comes at you. So it gives you less tactics as a player to work with, and it just makes the whole experience rather frustrating. But this Nintendo game of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, believe it or not, is a lot better than the Super Nintendo one we'll be talking about in a minute. So, punching more people on top of the truck. And they keep on respawning. I don't know if I'm supposed to move on, I think I am. Oh, yeah, there's the arrow. Yeah, so in this game, the bad guys keep on respawning unless you go all the way to the edge of the screen to see the arrow and then go back. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They don't do a great job of explaining it to you. I don't get why the bad guys have to respawn. And a lot of other games like this, you might beat up a bunch of guys and then the arrow flashes when they're all dead. So why you have to do the backtracking to keep the enemies from respawning over and over again is a very awkward design decision, to say the least. Oh, I got killed again. Terminated, I'm sorry. So, what else is left? I'm not really sure what's happening. I don't get what's happening at all. So, at least when I die, I don't have to start at the very beginning. That's something that's unusual for a Nintendo game. Usually, you could be playing through a level that's like 5 minutes long, and then no matter what else happened, you still would have died at the end of it and had to start from the very beginning, and it made a lot of games very tedious. This one at least has a lot of checkpoints, relatively speaking. So it looks like now I've made it into the biker bar proper. There's presumably some sort of item or something I gotta find in here. Oh, I just got terminated again. Do I got one more man? Let's see. Mission status, score, units, I guess that means lives, 0. Okay, so my last guy. And again, the gameplay has been extremely repetitive, beating up the same two guys over and over again. I think these graphics for a Nintendo game look okay. The backgrounds have some details. The characters are pretty small on screen. That's a bit unusual. But, I don't know, pretty typical for the time overall. I've played worse movie games than this, but I'm certainly getting killed a lot. Could be better at this one. If I had a gun to use every once in a while, that'd be a lot more fun. Oh, this is the boss. This big sort of lummox. And he's got a punch that really has a lot of power to it. Trying to stick and move, hit and go. But again, your range is so lame, and he has such a better range that I just got killed. Okay, so let's go on to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System version of the Terminator 2 game. And it's much worse than the Nintendo one, I'm sorry to say. So yeah, the Terminator 2 for Super Nintendo starts off like the Nintendo one, except you're already at the biker bar. You have to obtain pistol and shotgun and locate the residential address of John Connor, and locate and retrieve all future objects, whatever they are. So the Nintendo one, even though it was kind of ugly, it still had a bit of pep to it. This one, the pacing is so slow, and the graphics, yeah, are better. The proportions are a lot more human, less cartoony. But, again, your attacks have no range. You can punch, or you can kick, and these bad guys take a lot of hits to kill. The ones in the Nintendo one at least died pretty quickly. When you kill someone, it makes sure to point out that it's non-fatal wounds of carbon-based life forms. But as I mentioned, with the Nintendo version of the game, it doesn't matter, because at this point in the movie, the Terminator would have been killing people indiscriminately. He didn't have any kind of moral code in there until John Connor, the teenager, tells him to. So that's kind of bizarre. So I'm inside the bar, you go in these different rooms. Again, it's really unclear. What exactly do I have to do to get the pistol? What do I have to do to get the shotgun? And what do I have to do to get the residential address of John Connor? Do I need to go on a motorbike? I have no idea. There's a jukebox. There's a maid, and you can punch the maid, funnily enough. You don't get punished for that, even though she's a civilian that's not actively trying to kill you. Yeah, these bad guys with guns just keep on going at you. And it's really frustrating, because there's not much defense you can do except get up close to them and punch them. So there I just got a shotgun from one of the bad guys. Now I gotta try and find a pistol. A weird thing about this game is your life bar, instead of being like a meter up the top, is just a status bar that starts at 100% and keeps on counting down. And that makes it very difficult to tell how close you are to dying. A bar, or like a life meter, is something very visual, something very easy to see. But just a series of numbers from 100 to 0 counting down is pretty lazy and lame to look at. I'm not quite sure why they did that. There's another future object. They just look like trash cans with X's on them. I don't know what purpose they have. They don't seem to give you any power up. I'm just trying to beat up these guys, trying to find whatever weapon I need. So this Terminator 2 Super Nintendo game is pretty bad. It looks like I found the pistol, found the shotgun. I looked in there and I found the residential address. The level should be over, right? I shouldn't have anything left to do with this stage. Nope. Still going? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Power supply critical, 10% energy. Okay, got it. Trying to walk to the end, and it says the current objective is not completed. It would help if it told me what I had to complete. You know, I got the guns, I got the address, I thought that's what I needed. That's it. Screw this game. I'm sick of this. This is just obnoxious. This game's terrible. What a lifeless side-scroller. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Genesis adaptation of the popular arcade game, T2 the arcade game, which in the arcade was in a big machine that had these machine guns you held in your, or fake machine guns you held in your hands, shooting at the Terminators on the screen. So kind of like the Game Boy game, this one begins in the future, where you're, you know, the middle-aged, or whatever he's supposed to be, John Connor, helping the rebels fight off the robots in Skynet, with the same objective, ultimately, of transporting a Terminator back in time. Oh wait, let me take that back. You're actually a T-800 doing things, because it says at the top, Terminator 1, and if you're player 2, you're Terminator 2. Because you do protect John Connor in a later mission, my mistake. So in the arcade, as I mentioned before, you have these guns. It's very immersive. But playing this at home on a Sega Genesis controller, and yes, they did have like a gun peripheral for the Genesis, but not many games used it. I didn't know any friends that actually had it. This is just kind of a drag to play at home. The graphics don't look as good. They don't look bad, but they don't look so much like the movie. And yet the gameplay's pretty similar. They kept that part pretty faithful. So most of the time in this game, your ammo is the machine gun, and it'll overheat, and while it doesn't exactly run out of ammo, what it does do is it'll fire slower and slower and slower, which is kind of a drag. But you can open up these boxes at the bottom of the screen to get more ammo, to get coolant systems to make it so your shots have more power. The other thing you have is rocket launchers, and you have a limited amount of those, but those are good against bosses or bigger things that are flying at you. So you see in the foreground, you have two resistance fighters helping you, and you can kill them if you want, but it affects your score at the end of the stage. And it's not clear they're actually doing anything to kill the other robots. I think it'd be kind of cool if they were more involved in what they were doing, and perhaps they were in the arcade game. You could even shoot those HK fighter planes in the background, and later on those guys will shoot rockets right at you. So this game loses a lot in home translation. I really wonder why they made a Terminator 2 arcade game for home systems when the gun wasn't something that usually came with the system. Because remember, with the Nintendo Entertainment System, the original release of that came with the Zapper, and there's a few games for that came out. So if it was something that came with the system, you can expect people would have these guns, but otherwise you're just trying to sell extra gun controllers, which nobody I knew had, and I mean, you know, watchers of this could have very well had it and used it for a lot of games. But they really weren't supported for that much stuff overall. One nice thing about this game, even when you die, you can continue where you left off. You don't have to start from the very beginning of the stage. But as we can see, this gameplay is highly, highly repetitive. Trying to shoot a few rockets there, that can help sometimes. The most effective tactic to kill the bad guys in here is to hold the machine gun at the level where the robots, the T-800s, all walk across, and you can just start popping their heads off them right there. They look very silly jumping like that, don't they? And they do that just to get ahead into the foreground. And I promise you, in the arcade game version of this, stuff looked a lot more like the movie, but as far as like a Sega Genesis cartoony rendition, it's not bad. It's actually not, it could be a hell of a lot worse, all things considered. Later on in this game, there's an incredibly frustrating level where John Connor is in a truck trying to get to the time machine to send the T-800 back in time, which, you know, is when the events of the Terminator 2 movie really start. But you gotta protect him from all these HK ships and Terminators that are trying to attack him, and the screen is scrolling really fast. And unless you remember exactly what to do, he dies, and then you gotta start the level all over from the beginning. It was frustrating as hell in the arcade, and it's frustrating in the home version, but we're not gonna see the level just because I'm playing through the first level for time's sake. See, the heads are popping right off there, going back and forth. It's interesting with some of the other Terminator games that came out on other systems too. For the PC, they released a few different Terminator games that were kind of like first-person shooters, and you could pick to be either Kyle Reese or the T-800, and the one based off the Terminator 1 game. That one was a little bit different. Here, with this representation of the Terminator 2 movie, though, in video game form, I think it works really well, despite the fact that it's not that fun to play in this in the home version. But in an arcade, having the machine gun in your hand that vibrates when you fire it really adds a lot to the immersion, and it just feels cool. You're not playing like a little short, squat guy in a side-scroller who can barely even punch, and you're supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, but you're getting the shit kicked out of you every second. At least this one, you're shooting guns the whole time. That feels a bit more like the Terminator to me. And here's the boss of the first level, this big HK machine on treads, which also was a boss in a bit of a less threatening form in the Game Boy version we saw way back at the beginning of this video. So I'm launching all my rockets to knock off the machine gun arms, but this being a boss, he takes tons of hits to kill. And you gotta remember, with this, it was in the arcades at the time, you'd be paying anywhere between 50 cents to $1 for each life to play this one. So these bosses might take like 5 minutes to kill, and you'd be spending $5 worth of coins sometimes trying to kill them. They're made to be cheap for a reason, just to drain quarters. And when you take that gameplay style and convert it to a home system and don't really change anything, that makes it a lot more tedious at home than it might seem in an arcade where you're pumping those quarters in, and it's just a completely different atmosphere. So he's shooting electricity from the eyeballs, and I know that I can damage him there because his head keeps on exploding. But there's no energy meter. I don't know how many hits it's going to take. That makes it sort of frustrating. It's nice to know I'm making some sort of progress. What if I have to hit something else before hitting him in the head? But I'm just guessing the head is where I keep on needing to go. Also, you know, this boss is very boring. He just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Not a lot of fun there. But you gotta keep on trucking to try and knock this guy down. And I think you get the basic idea of this one. It takes me a few more minutes to kill this boss, and it's not really worth watching. So out of the different Terminator 2 games we've looked at here, the Game Boy game, the Nintendo game, the Super Nintendo game, and the Sega Genesis one, which one is my favorite out of those? Well, I admire the Game Boy one, at least has sort of puzzly oriented mission objectives, and the controls seem to be better than the Nintendo or Super Nintendo one. But overall, I like this Genesis one based on T2, the arcade game. At least the core game is fun, even though it's unlikely that you'll have a Genesis gun controller to play this at home with. But I think it's most effective as kind of capturing the chaotic machine guns, explosion everywhere mood that the Terminator movies focus on. So this is Matt for the Sequelcast, and be sure to check out the website at sequelcast.com, which is a podcast I do where you look at movie sequels, movies in a franchise, one movie at a time every week. And of course, we got our page over on Facebook. Just look up Sequelcast. You can find us on there as well. And we have a blog at sequelcast.blogspot.com. So this is Matt for the Sequelcast, and hope you liked this movie video game showdown look at video games based on Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Bye-bye.